Truth Espresso, episode 295.
Face it, we all would rather sleep in this morning. That's why God gave us espresso, to kickstart our zombified corpses into hyperdrive. And now, giving your mind and soul the morning shot of truth it craves. This is Truth Espresso with Daniel Minnick.
Well, hey there, friends, family, foes, and lurkers alike. This is your host, Daniel Minnick, for another exciting, fun-filled solo episode of Truth Espresso. This is the time of the month where my wife and the kids are up in the mountains, and my wife is doing clinical work, and so I am here to guard the house and to record another episode of Truth Espresso. So I'd like to do this short little episode on a political topic. I'm not seeing a whole lot of exposure for this in the mainstream news, but it's there. It's in a proposed bill. There are people pushing for this, and it's usually various opinion pieces that talk about this. So in this episode, I would like to talk about a particular tax. And we know that governments like to tax people a lot. You know the saying that the two things that are certain are death and taxes. And that seems to be true. Governments do indeed like to tax people a lot. Because let's count the ways we have income tax, sales tax, property tax, real estate tax, gift tax, inheritance tax, capital gains tax, dividends tax, Social Security tax, Medicare tax, payroll tax, excise tax, gasoline tax, hotel tax, import tax, insurance premium tax, luxury tax, marriage license tax, unemployment tax, 9/11 service tax, alternative minimum tax, use tax, vehicle registration tax, corporate tax, alcohol tax, tobacco tax. And that's just the tip of the iceberg, or the icing on the cake, or however you want to refer to that. There are lots of taxes, and they are certain and here to stay, awaiting only for their new siblings to be born, more taxes to enshrine into law. In fact, when is the last time you have seen any government in your lifetime, just out of the goodness of their blessed hearts, repeal a tax and eat the loss in coerced income? When is the last time you've seen a good politician simply lighten the load on the general public? However, some Congress critters have their sights set on repealing one particular tax. This is the one so-called tax that politicians would love to so-called repeal. The current 118th Congress introduced the Pink Tax Repeal Act. The previous 117th Congress before it introduced that bill as well, as did the 116th Congress before that, and the 115th Congress before that, and the 114th before that. So, the current Congress, the 118th Congress, introduced H.R. 7828, entitled the Pink Tax Repeal Act. It was introduced March 26, 2024, and it was sponsored by California Democrat Representative Norma Torres and co-sponsored by 27 other Democrats. So it's interesting that it seems like a lot of Democrats want to repeal what they call the pink tax, and there aren't any Republican co-sponsors. And as I looked at least the previous Congress, when the same bill was introduced, it was all Democrat sponsors and co-sponsors and no Republican sponsors. So what does the Pink Tax Repeal Act do? Well, first we should probably define what is the so-called pink tax. Well, the pink tax is not an actual tax. There's no statute or regulation or fee or fine in which money goes to the government directly in any way. It's not something that any government imposes. The pink tax is the name for alleged and apparent price differences that reflect gender discrimination in various products and services. So allegedly, there are some products that are marketed toward women that are the same as or very similar to products that are marketed to men, but the women's products command a higher price, maybe a slightly higher price than the men's. And that somehow this is greedy capitalist society trying to take advantage of women. Like, okay, we couldn't stop them from getting their voting rights, so we might as well continue to punish women by charging them more for the same products. We'll entice them with marketing things, and somehow they'll be suckered into buying women's branded versions of things and pay higher prices for them. They won't know what hit them. This is how we oppress women and keep them under our thumb in this patriarchal society. And the Pink Tax Repeal Act is righteously going to stop this. So, in the Pink Tax Repeal Act, under Section 2, subparagraph A, subsection 1, entitled Consumer Products, the text says, "It shall be unlawful for any person to sell or offer for sale in interstate commerce any two consumer products from the same manufacturer that are substantially similar if such products are priced differently based on the gender of the individuals for whose use the products are intended or marketed." And then, of course, point 2 says services. And likewise, it says, quote, "It shall be unlawful for any person to sell or offer for sale any services that are substantially similar if such services are priced differently based on the gender of the individuals for which the services are performed, offered, or marketed," unquote. Now, you would think this would sound reasonable, and you think this wouldn't be very hard to comply with. So why is it that we seem to see sometimes women's products costing more than men's if they're similar? Like, why? Why charge women more for products marketed to them than to charge men for products marketed to them? If they're similar, why do they do that? Why do companies do that, and how can they get away with it? Well, whatever the case, if Congress can just get its act together and finally, this time, pass the Pink Tax Repeal Act and repeal the most insidious, hidden tax that the free market has to offer. Let's not repeal income taxes or payroll taxes or dividend taxes or capital gains taxes or whatever. All of those are righteous and necessary. But let's repeal, quote unquote, by passing a law, a tax, quote unquote, that women have to pay, allegedly, because they're buying things marketed to them. Usually they're like pink or purple or something like that. Women might pay more for a pink razor than men might pay for a blue razor. Women might pay more for pink pens than men might pay for blue pens. And that's evil and oppressive, so let's have a law that prevents that kind of price discrimination.
Are you just watching? You grab the popcorn, plant the family on the couch, and flip on the TV. But have you left your worldview behind? Media comes in all forms, and all of it contains some level of indoctrination. Are You Just Watching? The Entertained Christian's Handbook to Consuming Media with Purpose is a guided journal with worldview-shaping info and lots of guided note pages to help you watch and discuss anything you put before your family's eyes. Purchase it now on Amazon.com. And don't just watch.
Now, are companies really just charging women more money for the same thing that's marketed to them? There might be some out there, but I really don't see where it's exactly that. It's not that simple. There are several factors that account for the so-called pink tax, and I want to look at two possible factors. The first one is supply and demand. Sometimes things become more expensive when the supply is low or the demand is high, or both are in place. Sometimes some colors of certain products become more expensive than others if there is a high demand for those colors, and the warehouses are struggling to keep up with the demand. In fact, I remember a few years ago when I was looking on Amazon for a Keurig machine to replace our broken one at the time. I noticed that some colors of the same thing cost more than other colors. Now, why would that be? If they do the same thing, why do you have to pay more for some colors of it more than others? Well, want to know what the cheapest color was at the time? Pink. What? Pink was the cheapest? Why? Because appliances like this, like a Keurig coffee maker that's going to be just as much a matter of functionality as display in one's kitchen, needs to fit in with the decor and the theme of the kitchen. In most kitchens, a pink Keurig single pod coffee maker would stick out like a sore thumb. The pink tax need not apply in this situation. It was an issue of supply and demand. Now, the House of Representatives may have its share of Congress people trying to pass the Pink Tax Repeal Act, but Pennsylvania Senator Bob Casey has been trying to make his case against the pink tax in the Senate. And I grew up in Pennsylvania, and I'm familiar with the Casey family, and there was a Governor Casey and stuff. The Casey family are Democrats. And so Pennsylvania Senator Bob Casey is trying to make sure that the Senate goes along with this. And so he has a case write-up called The Pink Tax. Casey exposes how corporations are charging women more for the same products. And I'll provide a link to that from Senator Casey's website. And then he also provides a link to a PDF file entitled The Pink Tax, How Companies Tack Extra Costs on Women in the Age of Greedflation, as companies using the fear of inflation to charge more than inflation should warrant that they charge. They're hiking their prices more than inflation should dictate that they should, and so on. Now, Casey's report lists several products that he observed in which the female version of it costs more than non-female versions. The report complains that pink baseball helmets sometimes cost more than blue baseball helmets. So the report says, quote, "Even safety for young girls comes at a premium. Recently, a child's pink batting helmet on Amazon was priced at $27.95, compared to the black version and the royal blue version, which were priced at $20.69 and $23.30, respectively." Unquote. So why is the pink helmet more expensive? Was it because Amazon, the woke company Amazon, still can't knock its patriarchal roots and insists on charging poor, innocent little girls more money to keep them safe when they're playing baseball? Now, what isn't being asked in this statement is the question. So why did the blue helmet cost more than the black one? Is there gender discrimination as to why blue should cost more than black? Maybe it's because the black is the most neutral color and there are more of those in stock at the time. More boys might want the blue helmet, but also perhaps since more boys play baseball than girls, there's more blue stock to anticipate the demand, and so there's enough supply to meet the demand. But also plenty of boys are willing to buy black helmets. Now, black's a neutral color, so some girls are going to get black helmets. Yet, we know that a lot of girls we observe like the color pink, especially younger girls. And some stores or warehouses may not know how many pink items to stock. They might not know how many girls want pink baseball helmets, so they want to get enough in stock because that's going to be a favorite color for girls at that age. But they don't know how many girls are going to buy baseball helmets, and so trying to anticipate this type of thing, and it costs money for companies, for warehouses to hold things in stock, especially the opportunity cost if something in stock in a warehouse for something that's not selling very well is taking up valuable space that could be replaced with something else that would likely sell more and make more profit. So some stores or warehouses may not know how many pink items to stock, and demand for the pink items can end up commanding a higher price. Now, I decided to search Amazon for this particular baseball helmet. Casey's report lists the Rawlings Cool Flow T-ball helmets on Amazon. He has pictures of them and he has the prices at the time. Now, I, in preparing for this episode, went to Amazon to check the prices for these helmets. And when I checked out the Rawlings Cool Flow T-ball helmets on Amazon, there were 10 different colors, and they all had the exact same price, $22.97. So there could have been valid reasons at the time that Senator Casey did his little study with Amazon there for why the different colors had different prices. That happens very often with various products. I will notice that a lot. Sometimes on Amazon the color doesn't change the price. Sometimes on Amazon the color very much affects the price. And sometimes color can affect the price for a particular product, and then other times all the colors are exactly the same price. So to try to blame the ebbs and flows of supply and demand for products on Amazon on the so-called alleged pink tax is just preposterous. It's completely indefensible. Now, while preparing for this episode, I also decided to look at Keurig machines on Amazon again. And I'll put a link to this in the show notes. Some of these links will probably end up becoming obsolete after a while. But when I searched for Keurig K-Compact single-serve K-Cup coffee makers, the black was $74.99. And the red and turquoise were $79.99. Is it because women want red or turquoise and men want black, and so therefore the two more expensive colors are the pink tax there? No, it's because the black one was on sale. Why was the black one on sale? Who knows? Perhaps Amazon happens to have excess black Keurigs in stock and they want to get rid of more of them, and so they're going to cut the price for that color to encourage people to buy that color. Now, by the way, a gray option was $115. Maybe gray is one of those ultra feminine colors, and so they're really trying to stick it to those women because they want to buy gray Keurigs, and it's going to make them buy it at a premium.
The Christian podcast community is a cohesive group of like-minded Christian podcasters proclaiming the truths of Christ with expertise and passion in the areas of theology, church history, Christian living, evangelism, apologetics, parenting, homeschooling, sermons, and much, much more. So check us out at christianpodcastcommunity.org. christianpodcastcommunity.org. One stop for all your favorite Christian podcasts.
So we could see various reasons for why some products might cost more than other products based on color, and that could be supply and demand. Supply and demand can contribute to what is perceived as the so-called pink tax. Now, another contributing factor to the so-called pink tax is that we're dealing with different products. Even though the products presented might be alleged to be similar, they're actually more different than at first glance. Senator Casey's report brings up deodorant, hygiene products as an example that really sticks it to women. No pun intended here, but we're dealing with deodorant sticks here. So Degree Sport for Men 2-pack was listed that it contains 2.7 ounces or 76 grams per solid stick, and this 2-pack sells for $6.27 or $1.16 per ounce. And then the Degree Shower Clean for Women 2-pack is presented as the women's equivalent, the same type of thing. This also sells for $6.27, but instead of 2.7 ounces, the contents are 2.6 ounces. So instead of 76 grams, the package says 74 grams per solid stick. And so while the men's amounts to $1.16 per ounce, the women's amounts to $1.21 per ounce. So here we clearly see two identical products. One's marketed to men, one's marketed to women, but the women's contains a little bit less and they have the same price. So here we're not dealing with different prices on the packaging, but we're dealing with different amounts for the same price, which ultimately results in women paying more for the same amount of stuff. But here's the question, are we really talking about the same thing? These are presented as the same thing, basically formulated as the same type of deodorant, and one's marketed to men and the other's marketed to women. Sure, like the only difference might be the color or the scent of it, but otherwise it's the same thing, and the women are paying more. Nasty, greedy patriarchalists. Now, is there a pink tax here? Or should we take a closer look? We see the active ingredient in both deodorants is aluminum zirconium tetrachlorohydroxyglycine at 18.2%. And so they have that equality going for them. So maybe these are the same type of thing, just a different scent sprayed in them. Now, the inactive ingredients tell a different story. There's a lot of similarity in the list of inactive ingredients. Both sticks have stearyl alcohol, cyclopentasiloxane, PPG-14, butyl ether, and isopropyl palmitate, among others. But the order of these inactive ingredients is key. If you've ever looked at the ingredients on, say, food items that you buy off the shelf in your grocery store, to protect the recipes, the proprietary recipes of companies, they'll list the ingredients, but they won't tell you exactly how much of them. But they are required to list them in the order in which it's more to less. So the first ingredient is going to have more of it in there than the second, and so on down the line. The women's Degree deodorant stick has isopropyl palmitate as the top inactive ingredient, and the men's Degree has the stearyl alcohol as the top inactive ingredient. Now, what is isopropyl palmitate? Well, it's a moisturizer and a thickening agent. So, are these things exactly the same? No, they are not exactly the same formula as many pink tax activists might claim. But we really should ask the pink tax whiners a question. If these two products were really essentially exactly the same thing, why don't you just buy the men's and save yourself some pennies? Why not? Are you really claiming that women are so undiscerning that they can be aware of a so-called pink tax, but they just simply cannot bring themselves to figure out that if men are paying less for things marketed to them, then why not buy the men's products and stick it to the companies? Boycott the women's products, boycott the higher prices, and buy the men's products. If it's the same thing, just buy the men's. Or when it comes to deodorant, you can also settle for gender-neutral deodorant. And that would make men and women pay the exact same price for the exact same thing. But that's not good enough for pink tax warriors. But that's not good enough for pink tax repeal warriors, because they want to have their pink cake and eat it too. And now, there are plenty of other things that pink tax freedom fighters will claim that it's a tax on women, making them pay more for women's things than men. They'll bring up things like hair care. So a woman's haircut in a salon is going to be a lot more expensive than a typical man's haircut at a barber shop, because men usually have shorter hair and women will usually have their hair washed, and there's just more specialty done, more styling done. And so supply and demand, naturally, the more ingredients that are needed, the more soaps and conditioners, the more hot tools that are needed, the more labor that's needed, it's going to result in a higher cost. So if women didn't really want to pay this pink tax, they could get a men's haircut. Now, I'm not suggesting that women get men's haircuts, but instead of just whining that somehow companies are being greedy, especially like women-owned salons, you think they're in on this pink tax, charging women, their fellow compatriots here, more money, like they're tools of the patriarchy? Or is it just the amount of skill and labor and tools and products needed for the type of haircuts and hairstyles that women would get at a salon than what men would often get as a typical haircut at a barber shop? You also have the claim that dry cleaning clothes costs more for women, and of course it does. But once again, different products, different services. We're not talking about the exact same service here, because when we're talking about certain women's clothes, they're often more delicate, so they require much more manual care when it comes to dry cleaning. Whereas men, if they're having certain clothes dry cleaned, it's usually clothes that are made of more cotton and therefore can be handled in automated heating presses and then simply folded, whereas the women's have to be delicately hung on a hanger and manually pressed. And so that's why the women's dry cleaning costs more. So do we call that a pink tax, or do we just simply say this is apples and oranges, and one requires more labor, more time, more specialty? And so, if any woman wanted to avoid paying the so-called pink tax when it comes to dry cleaning, well, they can always wear jeans and t-shirts, cotton t-shirts like men. And if they had those dry cleaned, it would cost the same as the men's.
Hi, I'm Sharon Wilharm, host of All God's Women podcast and internationally syndicated radio show. I'd love to invite you to join me as we bring to life the stories of women in the Bible and discover their relevance for our lives today. Listen at allgodswomen.com, your favorite podcast platform, or at christianpodcastcommunity.org.
Now, even if a pink Tax Repeal Act were to become law, it will not have the effect that people expect. It would not possibly get rid of alleged discrimination in products and services. It will only cause constant scrutiny of product and service prices, and that would be a major headache, when we should just let the market set prices, just as people are willing to bargain and search with their dollars. Companies can bargain and search with their products that they want to sell for dollars. Let the marketplace clear. But a pink tax repeal act, such as this current Congress has proposed, would only cause constant scrutiny of prices. It might even make some companies do real gender discrimination by making men's and women's products even more different as possible, so that they could allow for different prices according to whatever factors would set those prices, and then not have to worry about the long arm of the law breathing down their neck, to mix metaphors there, over having similar products with different prices. They would just make products completely different, and then we'd have another problem on our hands, and we'd probably have another law complaining that companies should not discriminate between men and women with their products. So this whole idea of a pink tax and all this complaining about it reminds me of 1 Kings chapter 21, when King Ahab whined about a vineyard that he wanted. He wanted this vineyard, and he wanted the nobleman of the vineyard to give it to him at a price that he wanted it. So we see in 1 Kings 21, verses 5 through 7, it says, "But Jezebel, his wife, came to him and said unto him, Why is thy spirit so sad that thou eatest no bread? And he said unto her, Because I spake unto Naboth the Jezreelite, and said unto him, Give me thy vineyard for money, or else, if it please thee, I will give thee another vineyard for it. And he answered, I will not give thee my vineyard. And Jezebel his wife said unto him, Dost not thou govern the kingdom of Israel? Arise and eat bread, and let thine heart be merry. I will give thee the vineyard of Naboth the Jezreelite." And if you read the rest of the chapter there, Jezebel takes matters into her own hands and takes Naboth's life, so that whiny little Ahab can have the vineyard that he wanted. So Ahab complained because it wasn't just that he wanted a vineyard. He wanted this particular vineyard. This particular one appealed to him. Think like a pink product, a product marketed to women, and political activists want to complain and say, well, this is the same thing, even though we want this rather than this. It's essentially the same thing, and this should be able to be available at a price that we want it at. So in other words, if you can't have whatever product or service you want on demand at the price you want, just use the violent coercion of the law to get what you want. And so we should understand, when we think about the concocted bills of the government, always to put them to the test of Scripture and biblical principles, and to think through the fog of political activism, and even something as silly as the so-called pink tax that's allegedly oppressing women. We need to be able to see things clearly and truthfully, and to see what the real factors are in play. And as Jesus says about being content with food and raiment, as the Apostle Paul says, being content with the things that you have. As John the Baptist told the soldiers, be content with your wages. We should not be looking for oppression and whining about things because some prices might be different in some products and services, and to ask ourselves, why is that the case? Maybe it's not because of this. Maybe it's because of something else. Maybe it's not because of some pink tax and oppression against women. Maybe it's because of supply and demand. Maybe it's because they really truly are different products. Maybe there's different amounts of more expensive ingredients. Maybe there's different amounts of labor or specialty that goes into different things. There can be things other than political insidious types of things. and believing in some kind of pink tax should be below the way a Christian would view the world. And we don't want to be like Ahab, whining because he wanted a particular vineyard at the price that he wanted it at, and he expected the seller to give it to him at the price that he wanted. We should understand the way God designed the world, and that supply and demand and other factors are part of how God designed the world and its limited resources, and we should be able to accept that and be good stewards of things and not look for oppression where no oppression is. And so I hope that this very specialized episode here was entertaining and maybe even a little bit challenging if you were tempted to think about that there is some kind of pink tax going on. And as always, stay tuned for the next episode of Truth Espresso, and God bless.
Thank you for waking up with Truth Espresso. Good morning, and God bless your day.
Hey friends, Daniel Minnick here again. If you liked waking up to this episode of Truth Espresso, I would really appreciate it if you would rate it on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, or whatever application you use to listen to Truth Espresso.